Welcome back, guys. In today's episode, I've got something a little bit different. We've got a guitar here, and I'm actually doing this video in collaboration with another maker on YouTube here. Brad, come on in, introduce yourself.
How's it going, guys? Can we just keep you sitting down?
I guess. We're gonna readjust frame here, guys.
Hi guys, I'm Brad. I have a YouTube channel where we focus on painting guitars, building guitar kits, and doing kind of modification and setup stuff, all related to this. So nothing on such a large scale as Phil here does, but yeah, a lot of painting on my channel as well.
And actually, Brad, while we have you here, I'm going to throw the links to his social into the description here to his channel. He's going to have some cool videos on the actual building of this guitar and finishing it after I'm done my part. I'm just going to be laying down some base coat, metal flake, all the good stuff there. Brad, you mentioned a gentleman gave you this stand for free. Do you want to just plug him real quick here too?
Absolutely, because that's what I do. So this is, for anybody who's interested in spraying guitars, this is SpinTwist paint rig. This guy makes, I think, probably the best spray stands that you can get kind of on the open market, so to speak. And this particular unit is for set neck guitars. There's a very good one for bolt-on neck guitars. So if you're doing just a body that has a bolt-on neck, for anybody who's interested in that, that one's easier to use just because it's an easier guitar to deal with. But this is a really nice setup. You can spin it around, you can rotate, right? And you can actually lock it in place in a few different positions for when you're spraying it. So pretty tough to come up with a better setup than that. Unlike Phil here, I can't just spray everything from above when I hang it from the ceiling. So for me, this is a game changer. He's got, like I said, 4 bolt-on necks, and now he's got a duo setup that we're going to be checking out on my channel soon that apparently does both. So looking forward to that.
And I'll put the link to that in my description as well, guys. All right?
Fantastic.
Let's get to it.
To pick up on this phase of the project, I'm going to have to do a little bit of prep work here. Brad was kind enough to spray an epoxy over his grain filler and over the bare wood for me. I believe this is Eastwood's 2K epoxy, which is a 2-part rattle can epoxy. And epoxies generally don't sand great, however, when they do have time to fully cure, then it's not too much of an issue. So I'm using 400 grit with some red scotch as a soft foam backing pad, as opposed to just buying foam back sandpaper. It's a little cheaper to do it this way, and I already have it on hand. And I'm just going everything, knocking down any of the texture in that epoxy, and just getting it nice and smooth. And then I use that red scotch pad just to hit any of the nooks and crannies that I couldn't reach with the sandpaper. As you can see, I do still have all of Brad's masking on there. I prefer to sand that way. I'm not going to touch anything like the fretboard that I don't want to.
You guys can see I have it unmasked now. Anytime I'm doing a multiple part paint job where products are going to be completely drying between parts of the process, I always like to unmask and remask. Now, I am going to do a little more sanding here. Usually I like to leave my masking on while I'm sanding there, as I mentioned there. However, let me zoom in here for you. I'm going to show you what I'm going to do here. Another challenge you run into when you're doing these multiple part paint jobs is you get a ridge at the edge of your paint. So on this guy next to the fretboard there, on the neck, there's going to be a ridge. And no matter what we do when you're doing this style of paint job, there's going to be a bit of a ridge there. However, there is a little bit that we can do to mitigate how bad that ridge is. So what I've done is I've taken a piece of 400 here, I folded it in half. And now you want to be really careful because obviously we don't want to scratch our fretboard. We are going to make sure I'm in frame here. So I'm going to come along and sand right up to it. So my sandpaper is actually overhanging the primer a little bit, but because the primer is raised compared to the fretboard, I'm not touching the fretboard. So I'm not going to go crazy along here, just trying to knock that edge down ever so slightly. There we go. And like I said, guys, there is still going to be a bit of an edge there when I go to remask for my paint, and my paint's obviously going to leave another edge, but we can do our best to mitigate that and make it as smooth of a transition as possible.
When you're prepping loose parts like this, you do have to be careful about what you're prepping on top of. That's why I'm using a soft foam pad here. That's going to prevent me from marring any of the finish that I've just freshly smoothed out. With the prep work finished off, it's time to break out the spray booth. So this little inflatable booth I picked up on Amazon for about $400, and then purchased an extraction fan as well for another couple $100. I do have a full video on it and building this frame and whatnot, so if you guys want to check that out, just be sure to take a quick look at my channel. And with our paint stand in there as well, we are ready to do our final little bit of masking here and get ready. So I'm using a razor blade just to trim up my tape around those edges. And once we're ready to go there, it's time to tape up the fretboard.
All right, guys, you can see we have the fretboard covered up. We've got our main cavities there for the pickups covered. And I did that nice tight cut in around where the nut sits as well, because we don't want any paint getting in there for a nice snug fit. I am just going to jam some paint into the top of the truss rod there. I know you don't actually see this. There's a cover that goes on there, but we'll just stuff a little bit of tape just into that hole. However, you can see I've left about 1/8 of an inch line around the edge of the fretboard there, and what we're going to do is run some fine line over that. So it's a vinyl masking tape that's going to let us cut our paint cleanly, a nice crisp line when it's tacked up. So we'll get that on there, and then we're ready to hang this guy up and start washing. So if at all possible, when I'm running fine line, I like to do one continuous piece. This one's a nice candidate for that. We can come up around and cut off again on the back side here. The reason for that is it's a lot easier to peel off one piece than it is to peel off multiple little pieces, especially when you're dealing with fresh clear. All right, guys, we're just about set up here. Guitar is set up. We're masked off. We're ready to wipe it down and tack it. I didn't film this section because it's kind of boring, but I got my extraction fan there, filter on the front of it, run outside. Brought another light out this time around because last time I sprayed in here was a little dark, and this I think will give me lots of light here, which is fantastic. So I'll get suited up here, we'll wipe things down, and then it's time to start spraying.
For my final wash here, I'm using a solvent-based wax and grease remover, and I'm going through with one wet rag to wipe it down, and then one dry rag to clean all the residue off.
All right, guys, so we're cleaned up, ready to mix some paint here. We'll tack off once we're in there. So I've got some GM 8624 Summit White here, and we're gonna mix it a 1-to-1 ratio for this Montana base coat. You know, I'm not sure how much we're gonna use here. Let's mix up a moderate amount though. Start with 8 ounces sprayable, and you know what, if we have to mix a little more, we have to mix a little more. And we're going to strain into our cup here. For base coat, I'll be using my SATA 5000. It's a 1.3 HVLP. Go, beautiful.
So with the paint all mixed, everything washed down, we're ready to go here. We have to do our final tack. That's going to get any final dust and debris off the guitar. And what I'm doing here is I'm using my gun with half trigger pulled, so there's no fluid coming out, just air. And that's going to break loose any debris or any dust that's floating around on there, maybe on the masking. And I ended up wiping down the stand too, just to make sure there was no dust kicking around there that could cause issues in our paint job. And just to clarify here, that is a tack cloth I'm using. It's a waxy cloth specifically designed for this. For my first coat here, I'm doing what's called a bar coat or a tack coat. So essentially I'm just dusting it on. I'm not getting a full closed coat. And what that's gonna do is, if there's any chance the material is going to react, it's going to have less of a chance of reacting when you're putting less product on, if that makes sense. So by doing that, I'm mitigating any issues. There were a few burn-throughs to the bare wood. I wasn't sure how my paint was going to react to it. Ultimately, everything went on nicely, and I ran into no issues, which could have been in part for doing this tack coat. Now let's take a quick talk about what I'm wearing on my head there. That is a fresh air hood. That's a supplied air hood from SATA. They're a spray gun company. And so all the air coming out of my compressor is filtered on the wall. I've got a 4-stage filtration system designed for breathing air. Then it travels to my hip there, and then there's a splitter. Some air goes to my gun, some air goes to my head, which applies constant air pressure into my helmet, giving me fresh air to breathe. Now I do have a carbon monoxide detector. That's that yellowy white looking thing there by my mouth. Just because running a piston style compressor and breathing air can be dicey. You can get carbon monoxide building up in your system. So I have that monitor in there. If it goes off, obviously I'll stop spraying and deal with it at that point. So as you see, my booth is collapsing. Let's talk about that here in a second.
So, some of you may have noticed that my booth may have started collapsing on me there. And it caught me a little off guard. It was when I turned on my fan there, which makes sense. It creates a vacuum, but I've never had to do that. So I cracked this little guy up here, which I normally do. It gives me a little bit of positive pressure. What happened is that where these two filters are, there's some flaps that Velcro on the other side. And this is my first time using this booth after setting it up again. And I completely forgot to open those flaps. So I went outside after spraying this coat, opened those up, and now we're back in good shape here. So I did my bar coat there, and everything's looking good. Where I burnt through to bare wood, I don't see any signs of separation, any kind of lifting or wrinkling. So we're in good shape. So as you can see, I obviously didn't get full coverage on that first coat. My second coat is going to be a little bit heavier, but not by much. And we'll see how we look at that point. I assume we're going to need 2 full coats on this to get full coverage.
So I'm not going to show you guys every single coat here because I end up doing like 8 or 9 coats of different products on here, but I will show you a few of each. So here's my second coat of base coat. I've got the first person view here, the GoPro. That's why I sound like Darth Vader. You hear my mouth right on the back of the camera. I'll dim that a little bit. Getting a little more comfortable with the paint rig here. It's a little interesting. I've never sprayed a guitar before. I've sprayed hundreds of other different types of stuff, but this is my first guitar. So getting used to it. As you see here, I spray the back first, then I'm hitting my edges, and then I come to the front. The way that works is that any overspray that lands from the back, I'm gonna lock it down with my coat on the front. Whereas if we'd sprayed the front first, then spray the back, we might have some dry spray on the front, something that's not as aesthetically pleasing, not necessarily an issue, but just ends up a little prettier this way. And car parts the same way. I like to spray the back sides of parts before I spray the front side. It's more visible when you're done.
All right, guys, I ended up doing a third coat on that off camera. So we did the 1 bar coat and 3 full coats, and I'm really happy. There's no wrinkling, nothing funky going on. Our finish is nice and smooth. We got full coverage. I did use my flashlight on my phone, spinning this thing all around, trying to get as much light off of that little spotlight as I could to double check that, and we are good. So we're on to the Flake, which is the fun part, obviously. It's going to be a challenge, though. Les Paul guitars, or Les Paul style guitars, have sharp edges all the way around on that front side. Paint doesn't like to stick to sharp edges, at least thicker paints. So you can, this is the color we're going. It's the emulated glass flake from Limeline Paint Supply. You can get it on Amazon. And shout out to Time Warp Custom Paint. I believe they make it, if not promote it. And yeah, cool stuff. So what we're gonna have to do is do lighter coats. You can see along that edge, there we go, kind of catch it in the light there. The bottom edge here, the paint built up on it, and that's just what thicker paints like to do, like clear coat likes to do on sharp edges like that. So I think we're gonna have to do lighter, slightly lighter coats. I might end up doing 4 light coats instead of 3 sort of medium wet coats. We'll play by ear. We'll see how the first coat goes on and go from there. So let's mix some flake. So we are ready for our clear coat, guys. We're gonna be using Axobel's Imperium 2K Euro Performance Clear. That's a mouthful. This is a 2-to-1 mixture. We're gonna mix up about a pint, which is 16 ounces. There. And you'll notice I'm gonna be filtering this one a little bit backwards. I'm gonna filter it right as I pour it out of the can here. That's because I do plan to, sorry, make sure I go to the right line here. I don't plan to filter this once I put it into my gun, because it'll just sort of filter out all of our flake. So I mixed 18 ounces here, guys. Probably way more than I need, but I'm gonna mix the whole pack of flake in here. This is the emulated glass flake from Limeline. So I'm gonna mix the whole thing in here. And honestly, it'll be a little bit thinner. Like, still gonna be some thick stuff here, but it'll be slightly thinner, which will make it a little nicer to spray the lighter coats, as I mentioned earlier there. Slightly lighter coats are gonna be our friend here. And the reason I'm mixing in this big container, it's like a full quart container, is that last time I sprayed it, when I was just doing that speed shape, it ended up being a little bit too thick. There were still some sort of chunkies in it, and I think that's because I was trying to mix in a tiny cup and wasn't able to stir aggressively, because essentially this stuff is a very fine flake mixed with some pearl, at least as best I can tell. And to spray this, guys, I'm going to be using my primary gun, which is a Satajet 100B FRP with a 1.8 millimeter tip. So that should be perfect for spraying this style of flake.
Alright guys, back to the first person point of view here. I apologize, I'm still trying to find the best angle at this point for being able to see what I'm doing and give you guys a good perspective for the lighting. Like I said earlier, the lighting in this booth isn't great. I'd like to get a little bit more side lighting to set up outside of the booth. But once again, starting with my backside, my edges, and then going to the front side. If you've painted before, I'd sort of describe this almost like doing an orientation coat for metallics. Like, I'm just trying to get a nice even coat over everything. I don't want it very thick. I just want those metallics to land on the surface and land nice and evenly. And I'm not trying to go thick, because if you do spray too thick with a flake or anything thick like this, it is going to sag, and you will notice that in your color. And you don't really get to see it in this clip, but one of the biggest recommendations and things I do when I'm spraying my flake is I'm always shaking my cup. I'm probably doing it off camera here where you don't see it, but I am always shaking my cup. As soon as I stop spraying, if the gun stops moving, I give my cup a little agitation, because otherwise that flake will settle in the bottom of your clear and it'll gum it right up and stop you from spraying. So we're watching one of my subsequent coats of flake here. I think this is the third or fourth coat. I ended up doing 4 coats in total to get the coverage that I was comfortable with. And when you're doing that many coats of any kind of product, automotive-wise, you really need to watch your flash times. Flash times being the time that you wait between coats. Most automotive clears call for about 5 to 10 minutes, and you really want to extend that the more product you put on there. Flash times exist because you don't want to lock that solvent in and cover it up with another coat of paint, which will cause what's called solvent pop, which are tiny, tiny bubbles. So while I started off with that 10-minute flash time, I was probably waiting 20 to 25 minutes between my final coats of both flake and clear. And speaking of clear, here we are mixing up more of that 2K Euro Performance clear, and that I'll be spraying out of my SATA 5500 with a 1.3 RP O-pattern tip. Another mouthful. And this one, I don't have the first-person view for you. We're just going to watch it from the outside. I think you've seen enough of the FPV stuff there. Clear coat though, I'm spraying it just medium wet coats as it calls for. They're a fully closed coat. I'm not going too heavy here because I don't want to run any of these nooks and crannies, but I also don't want it dry either. So that just comes from experience, knowing how thick to lay your clear coat. Overlaps, common like starter point is 50% overlap, and I realize I overlap a little bit more, but I also move a little faster. So again, that comes down to personal preference, and when you've sprayed for thousands of hours like I have, you sort of get into a rhythm of how you like it. When I'm spraying my edges there, I'm actually feathering my trigger. I'm not using a full trigger. That's something I've used a lot in the industrial world. When I'm spraying a lot of like thin pipes and things, you don't want to be spraying all your paint just off into the nether, into the atmosphere there. You just want it to land on the panel. And even then, you can see how much cloudiness is floating around in my booth there. That's why I'm stoked to have this fresh air hood finally set up for spraying in the garage. Not exposing myself to those chemicals. But yeah, with little parts like guitars, you often get a lot of oversprays, and it just is what it is. So we've got 4 coats of clear on there over the 4 light coats of flake. And there's still a decent amount of texture there, but oh man. The results on this are awesome. I'll get a picture tomorrow in some like better light than I have in here, but I think you get a pretty good idea there. That is cool. So yeah, definitely a little texture there, but lots of product on there for Brad to cut down when he does his graphics on the top. And just a quick positive note about this SpinTwist paint rig. This thing is sick. Makes it so easy to do all that work. No funky twisting. Able to get all my edges no problem because of that. Almost making it too easy. But yeah, we'll come in tomorrow morning. First thing in the morning, I'm gonna peel that fine line. I was thinking about doing it tonight, but it's late right now. I don't feel like staying up too much later. I think it's almost 1 in the morning, but we'll peel that first thing in the morning. Again, this isn't getting a bake cycle because we're in my garage in a bouncy castle. But yeah, that looks sweet. I'm excited to see this tomorrow. Alright guys, it's the next morning here. It's been about 8 or 10 hours since I sprayed it. The clear's nice and dry to the touch. Pro tip,
touch on your masking paper when you want to go feel something's ready to spray your next coat or whatever. Don't actually touch the product itself. So the trick with this is like when you want your tape to peel cleanly on an edge like this where you actually have a paint edge, there's sort of a sweet spot you can find, and that's why I waited just sort of overnight. This is a production clear. This is designed not to be baked, I believe. I'll have to double check that. However, I waited the 8 hours there, 6 or 8 hours, and yeah, I'm getting a really crisp edge here. I'll show you after I peel it. Yeah, so that clear is hardened up, like it's definitely dust free. I can touch it, it's not going to leave marks or anything like that. However, it's still soft. So you wouldn't want to take your car ripping down the road at this point, but just because it's a little risky on something like this too, just because it is so thick. And I've sprayed a few flake jobs now, so I was pretty confident everything would peel nicely for me. And you see the angle I'm peeling my tape at, like right back on itself. There's maybe like a 15-degree angle there. But what I'm trying to do is essentially cut that clear using the or cut that product using the tape. And there we go. And there we go, guys. You may be wondering why I'm filming in the backyard, and it is remarkably hard to capture the brilliance of this flake inside. I'm hoping the sunlight here does me some favors for you guys, because this thing turned out sweet. Like I said before, there is some texture to it, but that's all going to get sanded down by Brad when he does his graphics on the top side. I'm not sure if he's doing anything to the back side, but either way, still looks pretty cool. Let's see if I can get a little closer shot of the brilliance of this flake for you guys.
To everyone joining me from Brad's channel, thanks for heading over this way. I do appreciate you guys checking out what I do. I hope this video is to your liking. I know Brad's a very technical guy. I hope I got into the technical stuff as much as you guys like. But if you have any further questions about tools, products, techniques, that kind of stuff, feel free to ask. There's only so much I can cram into a 20-minute video. And if you guys want more videos about specific things, and yeah, ask me. The worst I can do is say no, and the best I can do is make some fun videos for you.
Once again, I'll throw the link to Brad's channel down in the description below. You'll be able to see how he got the guitar to this point, and you'll get to see how he finishes it off as well, which I'm also excited to see. Thank you so much for watching today, guys. If you enjoyed this video, be sure to like and subscribe. We'll see you next time.